Caving Alone by Tony J. Perriman. My name is Tony J. Perriman. People back home, the kind of place where porch lights flicker across long dirt roads and owls outnumber street lamps. They just call me TJ. I don't talk about that place much anymore. Not because I'm ashamed. It's because when you say you're from the sticks, real backwoods Arkansas, people look at your shoes, your posture, your polished vocabulary, and they try to make the math work. It doesn't. I don't sound like where I'm from. I don't dress like it, live like it. But it lives in me. The woods never quite leave you. That day started with something heavy in my chest. Stress, frustration, anger maybe. But worse than that, restlessness. The kind that sinks into your ribcage and scratches around like it's trying to crawl out. The air outside was unseasonably still. Blue sky, brittle sunlight, the kind of eerie quiet that almost feels staged. I needed to get out, far out. So I grabbed my gear, heavier than necessary, strapped on my boots, and walked straight into the forest like it owed me answers. No destination, no backup. No one knew where I was going. And that's the first rule I broke. The trail was overgrown, a twisting artery of mud, roots, and silence. Birds scattered as I passed. The forest was damp from recent rains, still steaming in the sunlight. I moved quickly, ducking under sagging limbs, brushing aside spider webs that clung to my face like silk threats. I wasn't just hiking. I was exercising something. As I climbed higher, the canopy broke in places, and golden lights stabbed through like spears. I stopped occasionally to take photos, close-ups of moss, strange fungi on dead logs, anything to slow my heartbeat. But the unease wouldn't let go. That primal edge of being alone in the wild, where one misstep becomes a broken leg, where no one hears you scream. I snapped a picture of a moss-covered tree. Then I turned, and I saw it, a mouth in the earth, a cave, wide and black and quiet as death, stared back at me from behind a curtain of ferns and dripping stone. The mouth yawned open, swallowing the weak light whole. I knew this cave, not from sight, but from memory, a half-recalled ghost of a hike with friends years ago. We'd searched for it once, laughing, joking, and never found it. Now, alone, I had. My pulse jumped. Logic whispered, "Don't go in." Common sense begged, "Wait!" Mark the location. Come back with someone? But the silence pulled at me, magnetic and cold. I ran my hand over the rock face. It was slick with moisture, cool like skin. The entrance was oddly inviting, not a tight squeeze or a vertical drop like most caves in this area. It was open, easy, too easy. I should have turned around. I should have taken a photo, maybe marked the GPS, if I had service, and gone back the way I came. But I didn't. I tied off a rope to a thick root above the mouth, a useless safety net to make myself feel smart. The descent was short. The ground sloped gently down into darkness, the sound of trickling water echoing off unseen walls. A shallow creek fed a stream into the entrance, its surface slick with runoff from the rains. But the water didn't look threatening. It barely covered my boots. Inside, the air changed. It was cold and dense, like stepping into a crypt. I pressed forward slowly, flashlight in hand, watching how the beam sliced through the dark. The cave opened into a massive chamber. Ceilings 15, maybe 20 feet above me, wide, echoing. Beautiful in a way that made your skin crawl. Something about the silence felt wrong, like the cave was holding its breath. I scanned for signs of life, tracks, scat, bones, the scent of animals. Nothing, just me and the dark. Caving Alone Part 2, The Fire and the Smoke by Tony J. I moved cautiously, each footstep sending echoes into the blackness. My flashlight flickered across jagged walls and uneven ground. The deeper I went, the more the outside world faded. No birdsong, no breeze, not even the faintest whisper of wind. Just the slow rhythmic drip of unseen water and the soft scuff of my boots on stone. Eventually, the chamber widened again into something vast, a cavernous expanse that swallowed sound. I stopped and stared, my light dancing across ancient walls that had never seen daylight. The floor was flat enough to sit. Boulders jutted from the edges like sleeping beasts. This place, It felt like it had been waiting. I slid off my pack and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. I took out my tablet, planned to edit a few photos, maybe sketch the space, breathe for a moment. And then the chill settled in. That kind of deep cave cold that seeps into your bones and makes your joints ache. My fingers trembled slightly. I needed warmth. But I wasn't stupid. I knew fire inside a cave could be deadly. I was experienced, careful. I'd checked for a draft earlier, and it seemed to flow steadily from the rear of the cave toward the far corridor. A small flame would be fine, I reasoned. Controlled, temporary. I scavenged what I could, mostly damp twigs, brittle leaves, a few pieces of wood half preserved by the shadows. Everything else was wet from the recent storms. I should have taken that as a sign. I set up the fire carefully, like a ritual. Just a flame the size of a clenched fist. I fed it a few torn pages from my notebook and watched the fire shiver to life, casting long shadows against the cave walls. I smiled slightly, watching the fire reflect in the slick rock. It looked like it belonged there, flickering like the heartbeat of the earth itself. But then, the smoke began to rise. At first, it trailed up toward the ceiling, curling lazily like it was stretching its arms. But something was off. It wasn't drafting toward the rear like it had during my earlier test. The smoke hung. Then it thickened. Then it stalled and dropped back down like a curtain folding in on itself. My throat caught. I stood quickly and waved my arms to push the smoke toward the corridor, willing it to move, to behave. But it didn't. It grew heavier, darker, more chaotic, as if the cave had decided to turn against me. I felt the first sting in my eyes, a sharp, acidic burn. My breath caught in my throat, shallow, ragged. Panic began to chew at the edge of my mind. It's okay, I told myself. Just leave. Pack your things and go. The fire's small. The smoke will dissipate. But even as I shoved gear into my pack, the smoke ballooned. It swallowed the entire chamber. Thick, black, blinding. A space the size of a small apartment was suddenly suffocating. Opaque. My flashlight was useless, like shining headlights into fog. I turned toward the corridor, the way I'd come, and aimed my beam forward. Nothing. A wall of white-gray smoke reflected the light back into my face. There was no visibility. I couldn't tell if the passage ahead was open or a dead end. I could barely tell up from down. And then, I choked. A deep, hacking cough forced its way out of me. My lungs felt coated, like I'd inhaled ash. My eyes streamed tears. My vision blurred even further. You have to move. Now. I yanked a cloth from my bag, something I'd brought to sit on, and wrapped it around my face. Wetting it from my water bottle, I pressed it tightly over my mouth and nose. It helped, barely, but it wouldn't last. The fire, still small, had somehow betrayed me completely. A single flame had become a death sentence. 6,000 cubic feet of space, filling fast. The ceiling vanished behind a thick, billowing tide. I dropped to my knees. Smoke rises, everyone knows that, but in a cave, it becomes a trap. I remembered the story. Kaprun, Austria. A ski train fire. 155 people dead. Not from the flames, from the smoke. Because they tried to climb up the tunnel, into the rising heat. Only 12 survived, the ones who ran down. So I did the only thing that made sense. I dropped flat to the ground, the freezing stones soaking through my clothes. My face inches above the mud. And I crawled. The smoke hugged the ceiling like a predator, but even near the floor, it was growing thicker. Every breath was a calculation. How long do I stay down before I pass out? I kept one hand in front of me, searching for walls, bumps, familiar textures. The cave had become a maze, stripped of light, stripped of orientation. I had no idea if I was heading for the exit or deeper into hell. Then, a wall. Solid, slick rock. I'd hit a dead end. My heart started to race, faster than my breath. I tried to stay calm, but the realization crept in like a whisper from the dark. I may never make it out of this cave. Caving Alone Cinematic Rewrite, Part 3, The Crawl and the Escape, by Tony J. Perriman. I pressed myself flat against the stone, cheek in the damp grit, one arm stretched ahead, the other gripping my pack strap like a lifeline. The air was turning against me. It was thicker now, acrid and biting, every breath dragging smoke deeper into my chest. I coughed hard, once, twice, the sound lost in the suffocating void. My lungs screamed, my ribs ached, and behind my eyes bloomed a pounding heat that warned me I was seconds away from passing out. Still, I didn't panic. Not yet. I turned left, blindly, letting my hands slide along the cold stone wall. My internal compass, shaky on the best of days, was spinning in a fog of carbon monoxide and adrenaline. But something about this direction felt right. Maybe instinct. Maybe desperation masquerading as instinct. The ceiling dipped. I dropped lower. Soon I was on my elbows, dragging myself forward like a wounded animal. My oversized backpack scraped along the stone behind me, catching on jagged edges, threatening to anchor me in place. My knees hit puddles of freezing water. Each crawl forward came with the chilling slap of ice-cold mud soaking through my clothes. This wasn't the path I'd come in on. I knew that now. And that meant one thing. I was still lost. The smoke didn't care. It followed me like a living thing, slipping into every breath, swirling around my face no matter how low I crawled. My hands were numb, my head pounded, my thoughts started to smear together. Then my backpack snagged. Hard. A sharp jolt yanked me back as if the cave itself had grabbed me by the shoulders. I couldn't move, couldn't crawl forward, couldn't crawl back. My pack was pinned against something I couldn't see. Panic finally cracked through my calm. I reached over my shoulder, fumbling to unclip the straps, but the angle was wrong. My arms wouldn't bend the way I needed them to. The stone around me was too tight, too close. I couldn't even sit up. My whole body screamed to flee, to bolt. But there was nowhere to go. The smoke was settling lower, thicker. My lungs burned. My vision tunneled. My hands shook as I reached for the knife tucked in my pocket, slippery, with water, with sweat, with fear. My fingers scraped along the fabric, found the handle, and slipped. Again. No, not like this. I dropped my head to the ground, forehead resting on cool, wet stone. For a second, it felt like peace. My body wanted to give in, to just stop. And that's when the thought hit me. Sharp and sobering. This is how people die. Not from flames, not from collapsing tunnels, but like this, alone, choking, confused, slumped on the ground while the smoke closes in. I remembered every fire fatality I'd ever read about, found lying down, curled up, one hand stretched toward an exit they never reached. Not me. I gritted my teeth, grabbed the knife handle again, and this time yanked it free. With blind, scraping stabs, I dug at the dirt around my hips and the edge of the pack, carving space between me and the stone, inch by inch, until finally, with a wrench and a scream, I tore free, leaving the trap strap behind. But alive. I crawled like hell. The air didn't improve. But something changed. The texture of the stone beneath my fingers, the sound of distant water. Then I felt it. Wind. A faint, cold breath brushing across my face like the hand of God. I looked up, eyes burning, and saw nothing. But I felt it. A draft. Airflow. And where there's air moving, there's an exit. I followed it, crawling, clawing, dragging myself forward through slick mud and sudden puddles that soaked my chest and legs. Every inch gained was a battle. The stone tore at my knees. The backpack, now half hanging from one shoulder, snagged again and again. And then the sound. The unmistakable rush of water tumbling over stone. The waterfall. The entrance. I surged forward, coughing, choking, lungs rattling in my chest. The smoke was still behind me, but thinner now, chasing me, but losing its grip. The ceiling opened up. The light shifted. Then suddenly, air. Clean, sharp, freezing air. I stumbled into the mouth of the cave, gasping, eyes wide, the dim twilight outside almost blinding. My legs buckled. I reached for the rope I'd tied at the start, the one that now felt like it had been placed there by some higher version of myself who wanted me to live. Halfway up the rope, I collapsed onto a flat rock shelf and ripped off my bag. I couldn't move, could barely think. The adrenaline had evaporated, leaving behind shivering limbs and a skull full of static. I just sat there, dizzy and soaked, staring at the sky. And I laughed. A broken, rasping sound. Then I realized The temperature was dropping fast. My clothes were drenched, my skin ice cold. I'd escaped the cave, only to risk freezing to death on the outside.